Won't you be seated?
Good morning. I'm Stacy Thomas at Orchard Hills Church, and I'm glad you're here this morning. I want to talk to you about why we give up on ourselves. Why do we get tired? Why do we get discouraged? Why do we let go of what God's previously told us and we give him an out? This morning, I want you to see God does not need our out. He's powerful enough to do it, regardless of how weak we are. God bless you. I hope you stay tuned.
Amen. He is all powerful, and he is our defender. He wins the battle for us, comes and finds us when we're lost, and we've forgotten who he is. You go before I know that you've even gone to win my war. You come back with the head of my enemy. You come back and you call it my victory. Oh.
Thank you, Kim. I want you to take your Bibles and turn to Matthew 14. And that's where we're going to go to begin with. And then we're going to go to a lot of places because I want to give you a principle this morning. And I want to follow up with what I preached on last week. Last week, I was talking to you about Elijah. And I gave you just a little bit of a dismal picture at the end of his life, or seemingly at the end of his life, and I left it like that, and I wanted to pick up on that and give you a couple of things. But while you're turning to that passage, I want to turn to another passage, Isaiah 62, and I want to read you something. It's a principle that I'm going to be bringing out that integrates, combines with every bit of this. In Isaiah 62:6, he says, I have set a watchman on your walls, O Jerusalem. They shall never hold their peace day or night. You who make mention of the Lord, it's talking about us. It's talking about believers. It's talking about the people of Israel back here. Do not keep silent. And give him, talking about God, it's capital H-I-M. Give him no rest until he establishes, until he makes Jerusalem a praise in the earth. Now, the principle there is this. I am to stay with it until God finishes what he's called me to do in my life. And I'm to stay with this particular thing that he's called me to do. I am to continue with this, and even though it doesn't seem to be happening in my life, your children's lives, whoever lives it might be that you've been praying for. You never give God a rest. He says here, don't give him a rest until it appears. Now, we give up on ourselves. We give up on God. We give up on other people. We get tired. We get discouraged. We even get lazy. And so what happens is we miss so many blessings that God has for us. And I want to show you the backside of Elijah's life, and I want to combine him with David, Moses, and a couple of other people in order that we might understand this principle. In Matthew 14, you know the story, and it's so clear here, so obvious. Matthew 14:22. We're talking about Jesus and his disciples. He said, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side. I want you to notice made. He compelled them. He told them. While he sent the multitudes away, and when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Now, what did he go to pray for? Obviously, his disciples. He went to pray for them that they could understand what's happened so far and what's about to happen in their lives. Now, when evening was come, he was alone there, but the boat, alone on the mountain, but the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, and the wind was contrary. Now, in the fourth watch of the night, the Jews divided up the night into 4 quadrants. And so we're looking here at the 3 to 6 quadrant in the morning. So they've been out there since 6 in the evening. We're talking about a full night here, getting close to 12 hours. But the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. In the Greek, it means it was blowing from all 4 directions. Now, in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them walking on the sea, and when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, it is a ghost, a phantom. And they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid. In other words, be celebratory, be celebrating, be overcome with joy. And we're in the midst of a storm, it's blowing from all 4 directions, we're about to lose it, and you're telling us to celebrate and be happy. Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it's you, command me to come on the waters. And he said, come. And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus, but when he saw the wind was boisterous, and he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, "O you of little faith." Notice he didn't say no faith. He said, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Not why did you come, but why did you doubt? And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And those who were in the boat came and worshiped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Now, I'm going to give you a few things from that, and then I want to go to the greatest statesman of the Old Testament, obviously Moses, and I want to compare some things here so that we can glean this incredible principle from the Word of God. Okay, first of all, I want to give you a couple of principles out of this. Now, Jesus was teaching his disciples a principle that you can't get to the crown without a cross. Now, what is the cross for us? The cross for us is that we give up our life. Cross was a piece of wood in which somebody was crucified on. They died on it. And so what is he talking about? He's talking about surrendering, total submission of everything you want in life and giving over to what God wants, picking up your cross, and you absorbing this death principle into your life. You're willing to die to your dreams, die to anything you want, die to all these things, and live to what God wants. That's what picking up your cross means. Now, Jesus embodied that principle. What did he say? I must needs go to the cross. I was born to go to the cross. Everything about me is going to the cross. And so when he asked his disciples to somewhat participate in that principle, they don't understand that. We don't understand that. We don't get that. But the first one here is Christ discloses himself in the midst of our difficulty. Now, I want you to see something. Obedience always leads to difficulty. You surrendered to God, and you lost your job. You started tithing, and the bottom fell out. Whatever it is, when we obey God, there's something about that the devil kicks in, God allows him, but he will orchestrate this God-ordained difficulty in your life to learn this incredible principle. What is the principle? I'm going to get you right. Let's go straight to the meat and forget the parsley. That what? That you'll understand it's all of God and not of you. It's always been of God. It's always been him. When he called you, it was all of him. You say, well, you don't know the mistakes I've made. You don't know the trouble I've been in. You don't know all that. Do you think that when you were preordained before the foundation of the world, God didn't know all the freckles you were going to have? God didn't know all the failures you were going to make? God didn't know all the difficulties you were going to be in? God knew that even before your apparent failures. Now, and he still called you. That's grace. Now, so he always leads us into difficulty in order that we may learn our power is never of us, but always of him. It takes a long time to learn that. It takes years and years to learn that. It takes, I remember, I'll just share this for what it is. There was a son of a preacher when I was in seminary, and he was he knew how to be a good orator, and he knew how to phrase his words, and he knew how to compound clauses and all that and all those kind of things, and it was profoundly incredible. And I got up there and I said, you know what? God made a big mistake, I thought, when he called me to preach. My dad was convinced of it, and I went through all those things, and I said, you know, if God told me one thing, he told me that if he was ever to get glory out of my life, it would have to be all his working, because he, from my perspective, had very little to work with. Well, when I finished the thing, we got our sermons back. His was absolutely perfect in diction and all this kind of stuff, and grammar was perfect. Mine had all kinds of grammatical errors all the way through it. And this professor, he didn't give out A's. And I got a B plus, and my perfect friend got a C minus. And that just tore him to pieces. He said, how can that happen? Look at all the red marks on your page. It's unbelievable. And the professor had written down at the bottom, all glory to God. He said, you have the potential to be a great preacher. Now, this was in seminary, and I say that because of God, not because of anything of my life. Why was that? Because this professor already knew the amount of dependency that you put on your natural resources is a detriment to what God can do in your life. How much dependency do we put on God? Right from the gate, from the get-go. Well, these boys had to learn another lesson. I'm going to bring this to these other guys. You just be patient. What they were going through was a dress rehearsal for the rest of their life. They didn't understand. They were facing waves. They were facing this little bit of animosity that they were seeing with the Pharisees and Sadducees. But guess what? Jesus was saying, when I'm gone, you're going to face the full onslaught of a Judaism that hates God, me. You're going to face the power of Rome. You're going to face Nero. You're going to face all of these people that are opposed to me, and I'm preparing you for it. All of them died a martyr's death, except for John. Now, they didn't know that at the time. They had no clue. They just thought it was great following God, and we're going to bring in the kingdom. We're going to rout Rome. We're going to run those guys off, and we're going to be everything I've ever dreamed of being since I was a boy. They had no clue what lay in store for them, and little do we so many times. Next thing is, we may lose sight of him, but he never loses sight of us. They didn't see Jesus. They didn't know where Jesus was. He was on the mountain praying. But he had never lost sight of his folks. He never loses sight of us. When our house burned, the insurance company was trying to get out of it, and they were trying to prove it was arson. And they went through all of their different things for about 3 days. They were digging through the ruins and all that. And finally, he came to me and he says, well, you've won. We're going to pay for your house. And I said, well, what was your deciding mark? He said, well, we finally bought time. And so I've told many of you this story. He said, we bought time on a military satellite, and we bought a 10-minute window out of that satellite. And he said, look here on my phone. And it showed the lightning strike the house 3 times within 8 seconds. Now, if we can do that for going back in time to pick up on what happened at a particular longitude and latitude, the God of the ages, of the universe that made everything out there, don't you think he can keep up with you? He can. He never loses sight of us. Then, next principle. Christ discloses his deity in our difficulty. It was only when the waves were there and all that was bouncing and blowing around them that they thought they'd lost it. Peter got called out of the boat, and he gets an opportunity to share the glory of God. But if you read another, one of the other Gospels, he said Jesus made as if he would go by. But Peter got out of the boat as if to stop him. Don't leave. As if to say, I give you the opportunity to engage me in your particular problem and me to show my superiority over your problem, but you have to invite God to do that. Now, Christ shares his glory with us in the middle of this. Now, I want to ask you a simple question. Has God ever given you a dream about what he's going to do in your life or your children's lives or something else? And you've lived and you've worked and you've not seen that. In fact, you've seen that disintegrate and you've seen that fall to shambles and you've seen that seemingly, I must have got it wrong. Something must be wrong here. I guess God's just not going to answer my prayer, or maybe it was all wrong. Well, human failure is necessary in this because we get that vision, we get that word from God, and what happens is it seems like even God has failed, and then he miraculously demonstrates his power in the midst of that, and he does it. Now, with all that said, I want to go back to Elijah for just a minute. You remember what I said last week? God said to him, here he is, he brings fire down, calls down fire. God brings the fire down on the Mount Carmel, and they rout 850 false prophets, and he outruns Ahab's chariot, and God gets all this glory. But then he runs out in the wilderness. He's scared to death because Jezebel said, I'm going to kill you. If the sun sets on me tomorrow and I haven't done to you what these guys said, that'll be a miracle, basically is what she said. And he was scared to death. Ran out there and said, God, just kill me. Kill me now. And then he goes and hides in a cave. And then God says to him twice, what are you doing here? Why are you hiding, Elijah? Well, God had to work him through this situation of seeming failure, and then God puts him back into service. 1 Kings chapter 21, verse 17, then the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, arise, go down to meet Ahab, king of Israel, who lives in Samaria. And then he told him what to tell Ahab and Jezebel. And then he uses him with another king that goes to inquire of a doctor as to whether he's going to get well or not. And he said, I want you to go to this king and tell him, is there no God in Israel that you go to inquire of a false god, Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? And you sought him instead of seeking me. And so what happens? That king gets pretty mad about it. He sends his captain. He sends his best 50 men after him. And he says, come down here. Come with us to the king. And Elijah says, if I'm a man of God, then fire is going to devour all you guys. And it did. And then this king sent another 50 men. Same thing happened to them. They all burned up. Then the third one shows up and he says, listen, please have mercy on me. Come with me to the king. And that's exactly what he does. And then God has him bestow upon Elijah this double portion of his spirit. And then what does God do? He takes up Elijah in a fiery chariot up to heaven. You know, he brought down fire at Mount Carmel. I didn't see this until today. Brought down fire at Mount Carmel, and these two guys, he burned him up with fire. And with fire, he took him up there. I wouldn't want to hang around Elijah unless I was wearing an asbestos suit somehow and wearing 10,000 sunscreen on my face, because fire seemed to go with this guy everywhere he went. You see, God redeemed his life and brought it all together at the end. And it wasn't even over then. Who showed up on the Mount of Transfiguration? Moses and Elijah. Greatest prophet, greatest statesman. Now, why do I tell you that? Because I want to get to this. And I want you to turn to Numbers chapter 20. And I know we've been going around the barn to get here, but I want you to see what he has in store for us. Here we have Moses. And Moses is told to do what? To speak to the rock and bring water out. But what does Moses do? It's unbelievable. Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, hear now, you rebels, must we, notice that, not singular, but plural, must we bring water for you out of this rock? Then Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod. Water came out abundantly in the congregation, and the animals drank. Then the Lord spoke to Moses. Listen to what he said to him. Why did you not believe me to hallow me in the eyes of the children of Israel? Now that's an incredible thing. Jesus said to you disciples, I want to teach you how to pray. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be of thy name. To honor God, supremely important. above what was taking place, to give him honor in this. Now, why did Moses, the greatest statesman of the Old Testament, fail here? And it kept him out of the promised land. What happened? I want to give you 5 things that I think can be verified in Scripture that will lead you to a faith failure and you miss a blessing from God. First is unresolved conflict. I want to ask you, do you have unresolved conflict in your life? Conflict that just doesn't go away. Conflict that stays with you. Conflict there night and day. Continuous conflict over some past event that you've never totally let go. Remember the monkey story? How do you catch a monkey? Get a jar, a jelly jar with the I think they call them ball, B-A-L-L jars, with a smaller entrance than the bottom of the jar. What do? Put a trinket in there. Monkey's hand goes in, won't let go of the trinket. You caught your monkey. He won't let it go. Think about this for just a minute. Here he is. He goes through 40 years of being in Pharaoh's house. Then he goes 40 years in the wilderness. He marries this woman. And then he comes out, and he goes through all of those plagues and everything that happens there with the complaining of the people. And finally they get out, and they're celebrating this great victory, and then they have to face the Red Sea. Pharaoh's soldiers are coming, and he says, why do you do this? Why will you halt? Look, behold the glory of God. He divides the Red Sea, and after that, it's continuous, continuous, continuous. They complain. There's no water. There's no meat. There's no garlic. There's no onions. They complain against Aaron. They complain about how long it's taken to get to the promised land. Then they complain that they can't go into the promised land because they're not powerful enough. Then God says, you won't go. You'll go back into the wilderness for another 40 years. Then they complain about that, and they try to go and take it over. And many of them are killed. Complain, complain, complain. That's all Moses heard. Now, I want to tell you something. If you absorb the carnality around you, even the voices in your own head that never let go of conflict, never forgave people of things, never truly let it go. Those come, as Shakespeare said, in battalions, not single file. They come in battalions. Things that you don't seem to be able to let go. I don't think Moses ever let some of those things go. I think they resolved and they revolved around him. You have to let that go. Let me tell you, I had a temptation this morning on the way to church. I needed gas. Here I am, pull into the gas station there, and there's a motorcycle there, and he's blocking 2 pumps. He's already gotten his gas, and he's on his phone. He just keeps flipping through his phone, you know. And here I'm thinking, there's somebody at the other pump. I'm waiting. I'm in my truck. And I'm saying, okay, I'll be patient. I'll wait a minute. I didn't want to blow the horn, you know. And finally, he just keeps doing this. And then another lady pulls in front of me, and I'm sitting there waiting, and she slides in beside me. Now she's in front of me. And I'm thinking, man, oh, man, how inconsiderate you are. And he continued to be there. I'm talking 10 minutes. Now, I've got patience. But 10 minutes, waiting on a gas pump. And sitting there with a guy playing with his phone. So I started praying for that fella. I really did start to get out and speak to him. I really did. And then I just went ahead and pulled in front of him sideways, and because there was 2 pumps there, and started pumping gas. But he was still sitting there. And when I did that, it made him mad because then he had to move his motorcycle around and kind of go around there. And so anyway, when he pulled off, I thought, I should have witnessed to him. But I would have had to filter my witness. And as I was leaving him, I thought, you know what? I wished I had said something to him. You know, maybe it would have helped him and all that kind of stuff. And then I said, God, and he showed, how many times have you been inconsiderate of other people? How many times has somebody had to forgive you? And I immediately let it go. I'm not going to think about that. That's an inconsequential thing that I'm going to carry to church today and preach a sermon, and I'm going to be thinking about the guy that was inconsiderate at the gas pump. Really? When Christ died for you, and there's all of this life that has to be decided upon in this life, that every single soul is either going to be in heaven or hell, and you're thinking about a gas pump guy? I mean, a motorcycle guy that held you up for 10 minutes? Really? Unresolved conflict that's not let go will revolve around in your mind and soul and spirit. 2, unmet expectations. Moses wanted to get to the promised land. He wanted to get the people to the promised land. And it seemed like they were just every day keeping him from getting there. Let me tell you something. This is another principle, blaming others. Blaming others for what you don't get. Let me tell you something. There's nobody that stands between you and the promises of God but you. God's had to teach me that the hard way. We never miss anything because of others. We miss it because of ourselves. And so, here are these unmet expectations. And he was just daily not, what do you do with unmet expectations? You give them to God. God, you know what I want in life. You know what I dream about in life. You know how you made me. You know what I really want to accomplish in life. You know what you put inside of me. God, you know all those things. I'm going to give all that to you. You're the one that made me. You're the one that made me want these things. But God wants to change your want to where your want's what his want is, totally. He's in the process of doing that. Thirdly, emotionally and physically, he was exhausted. Let me tell you something. When you get tired, you better watch out. That's what happened to Elijah. He was tired. He'd just run a marathon. He'd just run about 30 miles faster than a chariot. He had just stood against 850 false prophets. He had done all of this, and he never refilled his tanks with God. And so Jezebel says, I'm going to kill you. He runs out like a scared little child, and he wants God to kill him. God doesn't run. God's not afraid of waves. God's not afraid of problems. God's not afraid of all those things. God has, in fact, orchestrated those things so that you'll understand that principle. Emotionally and physically exhausted. You know, that's how Delilah won over Samson. Listen to the verse. I looked it up this morning. It came to pass when she pestered him. I didn't know that was a biblical word. Pestered him so that his soul was vexed to death, that he told her all his heart. Watch out for that. You know, the devil doesn't usually get you with a Mack truck. He gets you with just little bitty things. Little bitty things day by day. Little bitty things that are just eating away at you. Little minnows, not the sharks, but the minnows that are about you. Enough minnows are more forceful than a shark. And when we give in to that physical exhaustion and that emotional exhaustion, the devil moves in to do what he can to get us to say what we shouldn't say, which is inconsistent with who we are, and to do what's inconsistent with who we are as Christians. Emotional and physical exhaustion. Blaming others, as I told you. And then lastly, this is the key. This is the key to this whole sermon. He says, you see, because he called them rebels. He was blaming them. He says, you rebels, you're the reason I'm not in the promised land. You guys are to blame. You guys are causing all this. I'm sick and tired of you. And he slapped the rock twice as if he had a right to do that, to disobey God. Well, here's what God's saying. When he struck that rock and said, did he forget something? I wanted to ask Moses, is there a frog in your pocket? There is no we to this situation. You can't bring water out of a rock. Only God can do that. He's simply using you. He used your rod, and now he's using you in a different way. But it's not you, Moses. It's God. Not you. It's God blessing you with the privilege of being a channel for him to use through you. Don't ever forget it. Well, he forgot it for just a moment. You see, God could say, I and I alone will get the people into the promised land. Not you, Moses. You are the vehicle to do it. But the power behind it is still me. Elijah, I and I alone will bring fire down from the hill. I and I alone will protect you from Jezebel. Isn't it interesting? Jezebel didn't kill Elijah. That was history. In fact, he prophesied that the dogs would eat Jezebel's body. And they did. He wasn't afraid then because he got God's perspective. Now, I want to say something to you. It's never up to you. It's all up to God. You say, well, don't I have to obey? Yes, you do, but even the power to obey comes from him. I want to read you a few verses, and then I want to close. Philippians, you all know that, but you need to think about Philippians 1:6, and you really need to think about it. I want to read you a couple of other verses, but here's what he says. Being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. Notice that word, confidence. I am totally convinced in my spirit. It doesn't mean that circumstances won't cause you to emotionally doubt something, but in your spirit, you're on the rock and you know you can't be veered from that conviction. You're going to stay with it. It says, confident of this very thing, that he, God, who began a good work in you, will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. God's the one that's going to finish it up. Romans chapter 8. Flip back. Romans chapter 8. What does he tell us? He tells us here, as he starts, let's look, if you will, and verse 18. We know all things work together for good to those that love God, to those who are called according to his purpose, notice that. But then look what he says. For whom he foreknew, that's foreknew before you were born, he also predestined, he already planned for you, to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. Moreover, whom he predestined, those he also called, whom he called, these he also justified, and whom he justified, those he also glorified. Now, God did it from the very beginning. He's the one that called you. He's the one that predestined you. He's the one that justified you. He's the one that will glorify you. And you notice they're all in past tense. It's unbelievable. God's already finished the job with me already. I've got to live it out. I've got to play my part. I've got to do what God tells me to do. I love that in the Old Testament. I can't remember where the verse is, but he just says, play the man. I mean, when Jennifer was growing up, my daughter, she's, 34, 35 now. They just had their first baby, but she used to run barrels, horseback riding. She'd run barrels. And she was out there, and so her competitor was out there, and she was starting, and somebody said to the girl, her name was Lacey, she goes, be the man, Lacey. Lacey was a girl. Told her, be the man, Lacey. And Jennifer's like, okay, I need to be the man, I guess, in order to win this race. But we've kept that all these years. Be the man, Lacey. What do I mean? That's not chauvinistic. All I'm saying is be what God called you to be. And do what he's called you to do, recognizing that if he called you to do it, he will see you through it, and he will get the victory for it. It's very simple. Now, I want to take you to Ephesians. Flip over to Ephesians. In Ephesians, unless God's moved it. Okay, here we are. Ephesians 1, verse 17. He says here, There's a lot I could say. That the God of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of glory, may give to you the spirit of wisdom and revelation and the knowledge of him. Now he says that the eyes of your understanding being enlightened, that you may know what is the hope of his calling and what are the riches of the glory of his inheritance in the saints. Now you've inherited something in the saints. We've inherited in Jesus Christ. He says, what is it? And what is the exceeding greatness of his power toward us who believe? Toward us who believe. But he didn't stop there. According to the working of his mighty power. What does he say? Then he goes on. Which he worked in Christ. You want to know what that power is like? Which he worked in Christ when he raised him from the dead and seated him in his right hand in the heavenly places. Far above all principality and power and right and might and dominion. And every name that is named, not only in this world, but also in that which is to come. He says, I want you to know the exceeding greatness of his power. Greatness of his power. According, he says, toward us who believe, according to the working of his mighty power. That's what Paul said. Paul did more for the cause of Christ than anybody's ever lived except Jesus Christ. And what did he say? The goal in life, that I might know him, and the power of his resurrection, the fellowship of his suffering, being made conformable unto his death. He gave all three principles in one verse. Now, it is so, well, turn to Ephesians chapter 6. You say, I don't know why I fail when the devil attacks me, and I don't know what happens to me. I'll tell you exactly why you fail. Look here in Ephesians 6:10. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. His might. Not your might, his might. Put on the whole armor of God, not your armor, God's armor, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. Now, 1 Thessalonians 5:24, faithful is he that calleth you, who also will do it. Now, why would I ever give up on God? Why would I give up on myself? Why would I give up on what he's called me to do? Why would you give up on that? Why would you give up on what the promises that he gave you for your children and your grandchildren? What he's going to do in their lives? Why would you give up on that? I read it, the very first verse. Give him no rest. Give God no rest until he does what he said he was going to do. You don't rest. You go before his throne night and day when you're sitting in traffic. Whatever you're doing in life, you're waiting for something, you're in the grocery line, and you're saying in your spirit, God, I'm not going to give you rest until I see this thing take place. That's power. Most people give up. They simply give up. And something happens inside them. They die. They give up on the dreams God's given to them. They give up on the calling that God gave to them. They give up because of one of these reasons: unresolved conflict, unmet expectations, exhaustions, blaming others, taking responsibility for what only God can do. Peter, not why did you come, but why did you doubt? Why did you doubt? And what did he say? Save me, Lord. And the Lord immediately saved him. He saves us even in our doubt. He knew you were going to doubt. He knew you'd get discouraged. He knew you would blame others. He knew you would actually even take responsibility for what only God can do. And God frees you from that. Let's pray. Father, we come before you this morning. Father, we don't have to condescend or in any way capitulate to the devil's power. We don't have to give in to him. He is the author of deceit and lies and discouragement, despair, hopelessness. We know that's of him. You don't tell us to be hopeless. You don't tell us to be afraid, for you tell us that you've not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. God, may we be courageous in you. Knowing that whatever you've called us to do, you'll be faithful to finish it. Faithful to do what only you can do. And Father, we thank you that you've so blessed us, that you preciously picked us. God, if it had been up to us, we'd have never been picked. We'd have seen our own sins, our own failures, and all the things that go with our life. We'd have said, God, just step right on past me. I'll just be embarrassment to you. But God, you looked upon us in love and you saw us. And you said, I want that one. And I'm going to do this in that one's life. Even though they're powerless. Even though they're pitiful. Even though they're fickle. I am going to do it. And you have. You are and you will. God, forgive us for despair. Forgive us, God, for doubting you. Forgive us, God, for ever saying, I guess it's over, when only you can say that. And you'll never say it. You've told us that you've overcome the world. Be of good courage, good cheer. I have overcome the world. You've told us that, God. But you said in this life you'll have tribulation. You will have challenges. But be of good courage. Father, you've promised that you'll never leave us. You'll never forsake us. That your Son, Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, will walk with us every step of the way. Like that man on the beach, when there's only one set of footsteps, you'll be carrying us. But you'll never drop us. You'll never forsake us. You'll never say it's over. You'll continue in your power. Just like you saved us from our sins. In Hebrews, by himself, he purged us from our sins. We didn't help you, God, to save us. You saved us all by yourself. And you'll sanctify us all by yourself. And you'll perfect us all by yourself. And you'll get us where we're going all by yourself. All praise and glory to God for what you do, God. For you are the only God of all power, of all might, of all blessing, of all dominion, of all majesty, of all victory. It's all you. You, God. You are the one. And we praise your holy name. For it's in Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Thank you for hearing the message today. If you want to know more about Orchard Hills Church, I pray you'll go to Orchard Hills Church at orchardhillschurch.com. If there's any way we can minister to you on a greater level, please contact us. If you want more information about this message, other messages, or how we can minister to you, please contact us. May God bless you and you